Yeah, my name's Van Williams. Old cowboy from Texas that stumbled into the acting business. The Green Hornet was nothing more than a modernization of the Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger was a vigilante. He wore a mask. The Green Hornet was an old radio show that started back in the 30s when the writer of the Lone Ranger and George W. Trendle sat down in their office and said, we've had such success with this character out in the West. We need a modern version of that. So the Green Hornet was born. My name was Britt Reed, and in a number of the episodes with the Lone Ranger, there was a character named Dan Reed, who was usually the local guy that did the newspaper. So hand me down, whatever it was. He was my great-grandfather or whatever. Dan Reed was supposedly Britt Reed's great-grandfather or grandfather or whatever, and now I was big in the newspaper business. And when the radio series got going, he had a big radio station and a newspaper. And then when it came into my era, we had newspaper, radio, and television. So, that's kind of the way. And I don't know, I remember listening to it as a little kid, the Green Hornet, and it was a very popular radio show, back in the 40s and 50s and whatever. And those characters just have an appeal. They're heroes. They're heroes out there doing a job that the cops can't do. And that's the appeal of a vigilante. The way I got that part, I had done a pilot for a series that year called Pursue and Destroy that was, I thought, the best thing I'd ever done. I loved the show. I loved the people that were in it. We had one of your great actresses in it. I don't know whether you ever heard of the show or not, but Dame Edith Evans was flown all the way over and played one of the English nurses that our submarine, I was a submarine captain during World War II, our submarine went and saved all these nurses off of one of the islands that were trapped that the Japanese had taken over. I loved her. Oh, God, what a great lady she was. We just had a ball together, just joked together. And she had we were filming out at sea in the rough sea, and she had to get in a rubber boat, and everybody was seasick, and she was there, just tromping along. She was great. And that show was on the list to be on for next year, for that year. And this was 1966. So I was doing other guest shots and this, that, and the other, and all of a sudden, William Morris calls me one day, and he said, "Guess what?" I said, "What?" He said, "Pursue and Destroy has been canceled." And I said, "You gotta be kidding. Another pilot that I did that didn't sell." Because I did a bunch of pilots, none of them ever sold. Every show I did didn't have a pilot. So I said, "Here's the old Van Williams curse again." But he said, "Well, talking about ABC now, they want you to do the Green Hornet." And I said, "What?" And they said, you got to think about that, because that was the most sought after role that year. They had been testing a number of people, didn't find anybody. They were scheduled to go on that year. It was now June, just ready to go into production, and no Green Hornet. So I thought about it a lot, talked to my wife about it, and that kind of a role is a killer role. It's identifying with a character that is going to be very identifiable. Cut, print, the show's over, nobody's going to want to hire you because they'll say, "I don't believe that guy, he was a Green Hornet." Now, Adam West has had that problem for years. He's Adam West, Batman, and he's never been able to live it down. And to a certain extent, that happened to me, but it didn't happen very badly because I only played in 26 shows. He went for 2.5 years, we went for 1 year. So I didn't get so beaten down and established as that, and it didn't bother me that much. But that was how I ended up doing the show. I told William Morris I didn't want to do it. He said, well, at this stage of your career, you cannot turn down the most sought-after role this year. So what we'll do is we'll ask for more money, we'll ask for a better percentage of the merchandising, and we'll ask for more residual rights than. So one by one, those things fell, and we got them, and I ended up doing the Green Hornet. I met Bruce for the first time on the introduction of Us in New York with Adam West to the ABC affiliates. And I think that's the first time I met him. We had boutonnieres and all dressed up, and I don't think they were tuxedos, but suits with boutonnieres on, and I've seen those pictures so many times I want to throw up. But I think that was it, and there was so much going on. I didn't pay that much attention to it, but here was a good-looking Oriental boy that was supposed to be my sidekick. And I thought, they did a good job. He's a nice-looking, clean-cut guy. He first started talking, and I couldn't understand him. And I kind of said, say that a little slower or something, I'm not getting it. And he tried to say it a little slower. I still couldn't understand him. But Bruce had a very thick accent when I first met him. I mean, really thick. And he was hard to understand. But my impression was that here was a nice-looking guy that would make an ideal Kato. I felt like he was pushing himself a little bit for the affiliates, and I didn't think that was really him. A little bit of arrogance came through, which I didn't think was exactly the thing to do at that particular time, but evidently it didn't bother the affiliates that much and everything else. But after all of that was done and backstage and everything else, we kind of got to talking. He kind of relaxed in a little bit. Now I can understand him a little bit better and whatever. And he just seemed like a nice guy. And basically that was my impression of Bruce almost the entire time I worked with him, was he was a nice guy. He was always very respectful of me and my whatever I gave him. And he came for me for a lot of advice. And we would sit down for sometimes hours at a time and talk things out and whatever. And I think he listened. And I don't have anything bad to say about Bruce Lee. I really don't. If I remember right, Kato, C-A-T-O, is a Japanese spelling of the word Kato. During World War II, they changed it, dropped the C and made it a K, which made it Chinese. And I don't remember if the original Kato was Japanese or not, but he must have been. But from that time on, from World War II, he was a Chinese manservant. But, people keep talking about the manservant thing, and that was kind of a sore point with Bruce and everything else. I explained to Bruce that he had to be in that role as a way of showing himself without his mask and presenting himself to the public, and he was simply just playing a part. When we got in that Black Beauty and we got on our gear, whatever you wanted to call that stuff, thank God it wasn't a costume and a cape and all that junk that like Batman had to wear. But when we got into that, we were partners. We were 50-50 partners. He was my protector, he was my sidearm, he was whatever you wanted to call it. We were partners. And he understood that. He would come on with those nunchucks and go through his routine of doing this and that and another thing and snapping them around. And he'd put something up on top of a gimbal and he can go around and flap them and snap the top right off of it. And his agility with not only himself but with weapons was just absolutely unbelievable. He'd come out with those stars, and he'd have them hidden, and he has a right hand down the side of his face, leg or something like that, and he'd say, "You see that thing over there? Yeah, what about?" And there would be a star sticking in that thing. He'd never even see it. I mean, he was so quick with his hands, so quick with his feet. He amazed everybody, really. I tried the nunchucks and ended up banging myself on the face or somebody else with them, but he gave me an absolutely beautiful pair that he had made himself. And I was really proud of that. And somebody stole it out of my office desk, and I was really upset. I've got another pair that he made me that wasn't, it was hand-built too, but not nearly as much went into it as he built it. But that pair was just absolutely unbelievable. I got pretty good with them. I got to playing around with them a lot at the office and this, that, and the other. Good exercise, and with both hands, I could do it, but nothing like him. I mean, I don't think anybody's been as good with those things as he was. Well, I was kind of amazed at Bruce in his practice of perfection on everything that he did. And if he had a weakness in anything, he would work to improve that weakness. If it took a certain box that he built, a certain thing with rubbers in it that he pulled on, I was amazed. He would bring these gadgets around, these contraptions, and everybody else. "What is that, Bruce?" "Oh, it's my box for doing, this, that, and the other, and he would explain how to use it. And then he'd pull it out and set it up and doing it, and the guys were just fascinated by what he did because he was very inventive on stuff like that. And I never will forget when they came over to the house one time. I think Brandon was 2. And Bruce goes out and gets this bag of stuff in the car and comes out and he's got all these things that he's got Brandon doing and everything else. And he said, no. So he gets out this square block of wood that's this big and everything else. He said, "No, man, go stand over there." And he said, "Okay, Brandon, kick." And Brandon, little 2-year-old kid, comes sailing across the porch, flies up in the air, does a kick, breaks that dang thing, and I'm standing there aghast. He had Brandon doing all the same stuff he was doing. And I don't know, probably everybody in his family, I'm sure that Linda did a lot of that stuff. In fact, I know she did. She took from him for years. But his ingenuity at coming up with something to work on or work with to improve, and I think everything he did was to work to improve his martial arts deal. Oh, we had all sorts of fun times. Bruce was a maniac. I mean, he was all over the set, flitting around with his blah, 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 and kicking people and everything else. He was very enthusiastic about his, and I'm not absolutely certain it was called Jeet Kune Do at that particular point. I don't know where that came in, and somebody's going to have to enlighten me on that. He tried to explain to me what he was trying to do, and we had a lot of good times. We had a lot of tense times, but they weren't between Bruce and I. Bruce and I never had a fight. We never had an argument. I respected what he did. He respected what I did. He realized that I had been in the business a long time. He was trying to learn the business. He tried to learn those things from me. I would have liked to have learned more of what his profession was and everything else. There was no time to do it. I mean, we worked long hours. I mean, sometimes starting at 4 o'clock in the morning, getting off at 11 o'clock at night, getting a little bit of sleep, starting back in at 4 or 5 o'clock and whatever. But we worked long, long hours. But the decision was made early on that he was going to have the martial arts part. I was going to fight just like I'd fought in all the pictures, you know, the boom and, you know, the old fist fight type deal. And we were going to let him have that, and that be his own. And it was his own, and I respected that. But we had a lot of jokes around. He had a good sense of humor. I don't know whether a lot of people knew that. And he was always, you know, joking around, doing his tricks with his dimes and his flips and his this and that and the other. What he did do was make everybody very nervous on the set by doing his kicks and back fists. And, I mean, you'd turn around and whoop, there'd be a fist right there. And it'd be so fast you had no idea where it came from, nothing, you know. But that ended one day with a serious little thing when I was standing next to a gaffer and we were talking and this, that, and the other, and the gaffer looked over at me and Bruce had kicked out. He used to run around, jump up behind you and kick out and tick your ear. I mean, he was just so fast and so accurate with the tip of his toe. Well, this guy turned over to look at me just as Bruce had reached up to do that, hit the guy in the side of the face, knocked his jaw out of whack and everything else, and then the executive producer comes roaring down and said, "That's it. No more of that stuff, Bruce." So that was the end of the fun time there. And by that time, we were into the show 2 or 3 months, and it was time for it to quit because he was driving everybody nuts. Sitting and waiting for the gaffers to get the lighting done and going in to do a shot. Bruce wasn't in the shot. He was in his dressing room. A guy walks in, a messenger walks in, and he says, "Here." And I said, "What's that?" And he says, "It's a script." And I figured it was a script for the next show. So I threw it in a chair next to me and waited around, went in and did my thing, and came back and sat down. About the time I sat down, I heard this "Yarr!" scream, bang, wham, bit, you know, this, that, and the other, and you could hear the progression of him, Bruce, I found out later, leaving the sound stage, the slamming of the car door, the starting of the car, the screeching of the tires, exiting the lot. And I said to my stand-in, I said, "What in the hell is all that for?" And he said, "You see that package?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "That package is where you're going over and being guest stars on on Batman. And you get into a fight with them and you both lose." And I said, "You gotta be kidding." I said, "They would do that to us?" And then I got to thinking about it because Bruce could not stand Burt Ward. Burt Ward had let everybody know that he could wipe Kato's butt all over the lot, that he was this big karate expert, and he knew a lot more about it than Bruce did. And those little things trickle back, and we hear them, and Bruce got more uptight about it, and everything else. So anyway, as you say, there was a Mexican standoff on it. Bruce wouldn't do it. He just flat refused to do it. And, you know, I kind of admired him to do it because that was a ridiculous part. I mean, I could see me, and I knew what they were trying to do. They wanted to get some of Batman's audience over to our show, and I could see that. But I didn't see that we had to go over there and get in a fight and lose. You know, it could have been a draw or something like that, and, you know. But it didn't really bother me that much that I got into a fight with him. I mean, it's his show. He should win, really, to be honest with you. But when I got to thinking about it, I said it was the most ridiculous thing in the world because, you know, Robin was not he didn't have any expertise of fighting or anything else that I knew of. And for this fighting machine to go over there and lose to him was a real put down or letdown also for Bruce. And I could see his position. So I sided with him. I said, hey, I'm with Bruce. Bruce could be very intimidating. And he stormed into that set. He sat down and he stared at Bert. I tell you, I think Bert wet his pants. I really do. The word was out that he did. And Bert was so scared he wouldn't work. They finally talked him out of it that Mr. Lee was not going to hurt you and kick you in the face and the balls and everything else. And, you know, he was not going to do that. We're going to film this and everybody's going to be happy. But Bruce just intimidated the heck out of him. And I don't think he ever lived that down because everybody in the lot knew he was absolutely petrified of Bruce Lee. Benny Dobbins was my stuntman. He was my stuntman from almost the beginning of my career. When I got the part, they asked me who would I like for my stuntman. Well, there wasn't any other choice but Benny. So they made him the stunt coordinator. It was the first time he was a stunt coordinator on any show. And he was there all the time working on pantomiming in these, setting up these, because we did a lot of stunts in that show, if you remember. I mean, we used every stuntman in the business and went through half of them, and half of them wouldn't work on it and everything else because Bruce ended up kicking them or hurting them or doing something. They didn't want to work on the show anymore. It was a real working experience for both of them. That's why the tension grew, and it grew, and it grew to almost a point to where they got in a fight. Almost. Didn't happen. I got in the middle of it. There was so much arguing back and forth between Benny and the way he wanted to film Bruce and the way Bruce wanted to be filmed that we finally decided. Benny came over to me one day and he said, I got an idea. He said, why don't we let Bruce be the stunt coordinator on a shot? Let him be it, design it, do it. Then we will take him into dailies tomorrow and we will show him what's wrong. I said, hey, it's a good idea. He went to the camera operator. Camera operator said, hey, it's all right with me. He went to the director. Director said, you know, it'll cut down a lot of arguing, I think, because I think Bruce might learn something from this. Went to the executive producer and he said, oh God, how much is that gonna cost me and this, that, and the other? And he said, let's do it. So it happened to be a big scene where there was either 3 or 4 guys in it. Low-key lighting, they call it, where everything is dark. Bruce is in solid black. The setup is, I don't remember exactly, but I think I was trapped or tied up in the thing. Bruce breaks down the door, comes in, kicks, back fists, runs around the room, yelling and screaming and whatever. And we set it up in the master and let Bruce do it all. And of course, that was the main one that we had to let him run free on. After you break it down and go in for close-ups, it doesn't matter. And so that was done. We went on, and Bruce was happy, and he just couldn't wait to see his super thing that he had done, you know, the next day. So he gets, dailies were seen at lunch. So 12 o'clock comes, and we were going to sneak him in because he was, you know, there's a big law in the business that actors don't get to see dailies because they go in, they see something, they say, oh, I don't want to do it that way. So they change something and it doesn't match with anything that's been done before. So it's against the rules for actors to see dailies. But we'd already set it up. We were going to do this. Everybody knew it, but Bruce didn't know it. So I said, look, Bruce, we're not supposed to be doing this, but we're going to sneak you in behind the camera and this, that, and the other in the back door, and we're going to watch it. Once it's over with, we're going to leave. He said, okay, that's fine, you know. So we go and we go in the back and everything else, and all of a sudden his scene comes up. And I got to say, it was hilarious. You start out with this low-key lighting, the scene opens up, it's pitch black. You see a bunch of yelling and screaming, people flying through the air. You don't ever see Bruce at all, you know. And what happened was that somebody on the first row started to laugh, and then it went back all the way up to where we were, and Bruce he said, let's go, let's get out of here. He gets out of there, boy, he storms back to his dressing room. He slams the door, and he sits in his dressing room for like 2 hours. Nothing, he won't come out. We had to get in actors, you know, from other scenes that were supposed to be on later on. We bypassed Bruce, this, that, and the other. Finally, the door opens up. I feel a tug on my arm. Look around, it's Bruce. I said, let's gotta talk. I said, okay, let's talk. What do you want to talk about? And he said, where's Benny? And I said, I don't know. You want Benny? I said, let's go. I'll go find Benny. I'll go tell somebody to find Benny. So I told my stand-in, go find Benny. So I looked around and said, no, we went over and we talked. And he said, I don't know a damn thing about this business. He said, you guys know what you're doing. I don't want to do it anymore. You know? So that was basically, Bruce didn't understand that, you know, the camera, the way it was shot was not three-dimensional, it was two-dimensional. Depth doesn't mean a thing. Width and height mean something. And Bruce, because of his past history of doing this non-contact karate that actually was not non-contact karate, you did actually touch people, but you touched them and pulled away. He was working with stuntmen that didn't know this kind of stuff, and that's why he hurt them. He wanted to work in real close, but he didn't need to work in real close. The expanse that you get is a better way of showing punches than working in real close, even if you're shooting it from this side, because I can bypass your face, and you can go like that. I could miss you this far. As long as they put the right sound in, it looks just exactly like I hit you. Bruce didn't understand that. He even after all this time, he still did not understand what was happening. So he wanted to sit down and learn about two dimensions, you know, and he did. He became a real, and I think he ended up really respecting Benny for that, and they became pretty close after that. I know I respected Bruce a lot for giving in, because he was a hard-nosed driving kid that wanted everything done his way. Well, we let him do it his way, and he saw it was wrong. Somebody laughing at his work, oh, it killed him. And if he had a weakness, he would correct that weakness. I did see Enter the Dragon. He really understood, you know, the use of cameras and everything else, and I thought that he had achieved his dream, and I was real proud of him for that. And I always told him that every time I saw him. And he just did, he got what he wanted, and I knew he was going to do it. He had the determination to do it. He was a phenomenon at a time a phenomenon was right to happen, I think. He was an artist at what he did. The moves and the things that he made were moves that weren't repeated again for a number of years. There were a lot of copies of Bruce Lee, but I don't think anybody came close. I think my fondest memory of Bruce always was his enthusiasm, and it never ebbed, of his martial arts. And if we ever got together, that's all he'd ever talk about. He wasn't interested in anything else. And, God dang it, he was a great guy. And we stayed in touch over the years, sometimes long periods of time, but so he'd come in town, he'd give me a call, we'd go have lunch, he'd tell me all of his troubles, I'd tell him all my troubles, and we'd talk like old buddies. And he was one of the few friends. In fact, I figured it up the other day. I had two friends from the acting business, Jeffrey Hunter and him. And, we stayed in touch, and I'm sure if he would still be alive, we'd still be talking on the phone or having lunch or doing something all the time. And I admired and respected what he did, and it seems like we kind of had we had a good rapport between the two of us, which could have been bad because we had a lot of rough times filming this stupid thing, and, the work hours and the pressure and the this, and get the thing done and get it, just go all the time. But he and I came out good friends. People have told me many times, God, you got to write a book. You've had an interesting life. I don't think I've had a very interesting life. When you ask a question like that, which I think this is the first time that's ever been asked me, I want to be known as a good father, as a good grandfather, as a good husband. That's what I want to be remembered by.